Okay, hey everybody, how's it going? It's very bright behind me today. Um, Too Many Grass Toads, banger song. Thank you, I like it myself. Um, Celtic Gomer, always. I am always cool with the Celts. Hope y'all are doing well tonight. Space Empanada or Dog, welcome. Jason Voorhees, I sent you a message on Twitch. Feel free to message me back. Hey Marlon, I'm glad you're here. Darth Tourniquet, good evening to you as well. Yeah, we are doing Pedagogy of the Oppressed today, so it should be kind of interesting. I don't know. Fluid, yes. My friend Fluid Acrylic is in chat. Y'all are all my friends, but I know some of y'all in real life, so. Hey Elisa, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I hope that you're doing okay. I know you got some bad news.
I haven't been listening much, but love supporting you.
All right, King Nothing. Well, thank you. I appreciate your support. That's funny. Socialist, this is on your book to read, your list to read. Well, hopefully I can go over it and explain some stuff that will be interesting. I don't know if it'll make you want to read it. I don't know if I'm the lead. I'm a bit of a biased source, to be honest, because I'm reading this book. I thought I was going to get through everything in a one shot, but I really can't. I'm gonna need two times to go through all this book because it's dense. It's not that long of a book, but it's dense. ICB3 from Brazil, right on. This book is obviously from your home country, so I hope I don't mess it all up. But yeah, it's interesting. Let's get right down into it because it's 7:08 and I gotta get started. Because I've been taking longer and longer, bullshitting longer and longer. And to be honest, my stream is for teaching. My stream is for talking about books. If I spend all the time just goofing off and bullshitting, then I think some people wouldn't like it that much. You know what I mean? Use the bullshitting as a little bit of saison, not the whole thing. Well, Jason, you are probably right. Chantilly would do this book more justice, if only because Chantilly has read this book at least 3 times. They are, they are definitely somebody who I think would do this book more justice than me. I tell you, if Chantilly ever does present this book, then I will tune in and listen to their take on it. Another friend of mine, Zoe, and I was reading this book at the same time together, and honestly, I think they got a whole bunch more out of it than I did. They were, just highlighting and highlighting pages, and I was, not. So, so what are you going to do? Hey, Choice, glad you're here. I do definitely get distracted by chat, Marlon. It's true. Elisa, you're here for the bullshit exclusively? That's enough communism. I'm here for the bullshit. All right, let's do it. Oh, what the ever-loving shit. God dang. Snuck up on me. Socialist says, so when I do get this book, I need to prepare to go over it a few times then. I read every goddamn sentence at least twice. I'll tell you that. I read every damn sentence at least twice. Hey, Chun-Li, I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for your resubscription. It's dense. And Paulo Friere, he's got a way of talking that I sometimes just want to shake him and be like, just talk straight. Talk normal. And, okay, Space Empanada. Well, I'm going to do my best to explain problem-posing approach. I do at least cover that. I'm only doing the first 2 chapters this time, right? But I will talk about what I think of as problem posing education. All right. Is that the case, Jason? Yeah, fluid. Hey, PMC Thrall, welcome. All right, so one other thing is I used to be a teacher, right? I was a teacher for a while. I really cared about a lot of the ideas in this book. So I wrote, I wrote a thesis basically on a lot of the ideas that are in this book, but from a different point of view. I hadn't read this book at the time, so I wrote a practical guide, and a lot of the things that he talks about are on the cutting edge of education, right? Even regular liberal educators recognize that he is, like, the things that he's talking about are the way to learn. So believe me when I say that even though I don't like the book, the subject matter is very interesting, all right? I think he could have said it in a little bit better way, but the subject matter itself is very good. Chun-Li just subscribing month to month, letting us know one by one. That's great. I love it. So Twitch has been doing this real thing to me too, this real annoying thing to me too, Chun-Li, where like I've been subscribed to Dexter Chaco for 8 months and I can't use Dexter Chaco's emotes, which just pisses me off, But what are you going to do? Nothing you can do. So anyway, let's get to it. All right, here's a background. I didn't fill out the background that much, but I'll tell you about it instead, okay? So it was written by this guy, Paulo Friere, in 1968. He was a teacher, but he also became like a educational leader in his area, especially before the fascist takeover. All right, King Nothing, I'm sorry about that. Obtuse, good to see you too. Thank you. Pedagogy means the science of teaching. All right. So, oh boy, LPG, Steffi, feel free to talk in the chat. All right, because I struggled to understand a lot of stuff in this book. So we are going to use the goddamn pedagogy of the oppressed method by making me the teacher student and y'all the student teachers. I mean, I actually feel like, although sometimes because I use slideshows and can, be just I'm the only one talking, it can be a bit of a narrative teaching experience, right? Which we'll get to in a bit, what that means. But I also think that of all the classes I've ever taught, these Twitch classes come the closest to really being like a pedagogy of the oppressed style class, So anyway, so Friere gets politically exiled. He starts this program, and as in a teaching program for poor farmers and such. And in 45 days, teaches a whole bunch of farmers how to read, or like that was what the program is for. I don't know how successful he actually was at it. But because of this program, the Brazilian government in his area, created a whole bunch of similar programs. But then very shortly after, the fascists took over. And so he ended up getting jailed for 2 months. And then he went into political exile. So, hey, Waxing Philosophical. Somebody, let's give a shout out to Waxing. What's funny is my shout outs not working? Well, shit, man. Oh, wait, no, maybe I got to do this. Shout out. I did it backwards. There we go. You enjoy theory class? I'm glad, Chun-Li. I hope that having just a little bit of theory in your life, just a little bit of talking about this kind of stuff, is beneficial and enriches your life a little bit. It's important to me. Hey, Kay, how do you say? Welcome. Glad you're here. Yes, the 1964 Brazilian coup supported by the U.S. Exactly. So yeah. this is an interesting thing because he's not a revolutionary. And in the preface, he points out that he is not a revolutionary. He was he never fought against anything. He was basically a teacher and a bureaucrat for his whole life. And so as a result, he says, like, people might criticize that, but this is my understanding of the truth. So, fucking everybody's got to liberate themselves. This is the way that I'm trying to liberate myself. So my personal opinion about that is that some of the language can be a bit academic, and he can have a hard time getting some ideas. But the most frustrating thing to me about this book is that he definitely teaches in a narrative style about how the narrative style is bad. It's very one directional. And of course it's a book, right? But you can have teaching exercises that lead you to a truth, right? In a workbook style. But what he has is he spells it out straight and talks about how things like propaganda are bad and are anti-liberation. All the while, the book is a work of propaganda in many ways. If you understand propaganda to be anything and everything, not just painted up pictures of like big brawny Russian men shaking hands or whatever. If any new streamers are in chat, just please make yourself known and get yourself a shout out. I really appreciate y'all coming by. Let's get started with the book. So right off the bat, he hits some really interesting ideas. He says people are afraid of recognizing their own oppression, right? And afraid of becoming more conscious of the way the world really is. And that some people will push back against it with ferocity, right? That it takes a certain amount of deprogramming to even be able to do it. But it's not because people are programmed factually, although that's part of it, but it's also because people are taught to think in a certain way, right? And the entire model of education is dehumanizing and teaches us to think in a very credulous way, he says, right? So like in a way where you are just believing anything you're told, and makes you malleable. So the oppressed are taught by the oppressors to accept their position, and that things are not actually as bad as it feels, and to ignore their feelings and to trust what other people are saying, right? So if you're taught to think that way your whole life, then the act of actually changing the world, the act of liberating yourself, becomes a terrifying thing because it is a completely new way of thinking. It's it's much more new than simply a new fact. And I think this is a fascinating idea. This initial fear of liberation, I have seen it myself. When you talk to people and you tell the straight up truth, you tell your truth. You talk to them about their experiences. You share some understanding about who your oppressors are, right? The minute you start to kind of veer outside of what has been acceptable to the mainstream, when you start veering outside of what people are allowed to think, many people will get visibly uncomfortable. Now, if you're just wrong, if you're just telling, a fact incorrectly, if I tell you that my car is green, but you know that my car is black, right? You're probably not going to get that upset if you know that I'm just wrong about something like that. So why is it that people get so upset when we try to explain our experiences with oppression and our understanding of what the way to liberation is? Well, the answer is that the new way of thinking itself is scary and dangerous. And yes, exactly, Waxing. Liberation comes with responsibility and real accountability. And to be humanized is to have full responsibility over yourself. So, hey, Dari, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming by. I felt so excited and annoyed at the same time when I kind of discovered the whole leftism thing last year, so this rings true for me. Certainly, rings true for me too. I was scared shitless the first time I picked up a book of Lenin, which is very funny, right? But it's just the way that it is. Now, I think a lot of y'all in chat have had some of these experiences, and you kind of like that first solid, powerful thought that Friere puts into the preface is a universal truth. I think all of us who have become liberated in some ways have experienced this initial fear before liberation. So he goes on in the preface to say that there's sectarians and there's radicals. And all through this book, what he's talking about is the radical versus the reactionary. But he considers all people who are sectarian to be reactionaries. There's a little bit of horseshoe theory going on in this book, for sure, okay? So he talks about, left and right. He says things like that quite a bit. So he says sectarians are irrational, right? That we're all dogmatic, that we block human progress, and that radicals are never certain about things. They don't have a certainty, and only radicals can be the bringers of liberation. That sectarians, left or right, cannot be bringers of liberation. Now, y'all knowing me probably know that I think that that's a bit much, but I do want to accurately explain what Friere is saying. Trinley says, starting to tackle whiteness and understanding my position in the world is a lot. Agreed. Tackling whiteness is an emotionally difficult thing, And I don't spend a lot of time on my stream being like, oh, my fellow white people, I understand your pain for struggling with the things that are right to struggle with. But it's true, right? It is everything that we are talking about as far as liberating your mindset certainly applies to liberating yourself from whiteness. And let me tell you something. Friere specifically spells out how the oppressed are the liberators of both the oppressed and the oppressor. So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, John, welcome. Glad you're here. The topic is Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Friere. I should probably put like the title of the book in like the bottom or the top of the page or something. Hey, Pheasant, 75% through blood in my eye. That's fantastic. Love to hear that. And Chun-Li, yes, it's true. Realizing no one wanted or needed to hear your tears about it is true. But I do think that it's interesting because there's a certain amount of white tears about whiteness and feeling like being so bad and feeling terrible for being the oppressor that is a part of whiteness, right? The feeling like even when we are discussing the pain that I have caused you, I am still the center of attention. However, right, that does not mean that there is no pain to overcoming whiteness and changing your point of view, right? Changing the way that you relate to the world. Just because you were an oppressor doesn't mean that you don't have pain in the recognition that you're part of the oppressor class. Friere spells that out specifically, right? He literally says these words in the book, right? That like it is a traumatic experience to understand that you are that you are an oppressor, right? So, all right, chapter 1. Why is this book necessary? Can you drop a link for Lawsuit's fundraiser? Of course. I love Lawsuit. Let me give a shout out for Lawsuit. Maybe we'll raid into Lawsuit today if they're doing a fundraiser. Okay. So the very first paragraph of this book, Friere talks about humanization versus dehumanization. Now, this is fascinating because let me just ask y'all, chat, how often have you heard Marxists, communists, whatever, talk about humanization. Have you ever even heard the word humanization used in a liberatory communist context? I hadn't very much before I read this book. In fact, I had this whole conversation with my friend Zoe about humanization. And Zoe taught me that, like, yeah, humanization was a huge part of what Marx was talking about. This whole, the dialectic of alienation and humanization. So, and it ain't Marxist humanism, Jason Voorhees. That's what's funny. So humanization is a complicated topic. It's one that probably waxing philosophical would probably be able to talk about a lot more than I would. But it's this idea of becoming the most human, freeing your mental shackles. And so, like, Marx wasn't just talking about putting food in everyone's belly, but this kind of self-actualization beyond the selfish, to become the most human possible in all of the ways that humanity is really is a positive thing, right? The difference between being trained into being an automaton versus being trained into being being liberated into being a human, right? So it's an interesting concept, and it's one that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around. But Friere talks about how, like, this is what communists have been talking about for a long time. This is a big part of the point. We are not just trying to get people to stop getting shot at by police. We want to get people to stop getting shot at by police. We want to get the boot off of our neck. We want to stop working in terrible conditions for many, many hours, right? We want to stop worrying about losing our homes and having health care. But those things are only a part of it. And Marx specifically talked about the other parts of it, right? The things that are beyond taking care of our bodies and even taking care of our mental health, right? That there is something to achieve beyond having good mental health and good physical health. And it's not spiritual. It is a way of being and acting that is liberated, right? So being happy and being liberated are not necessarily always the same thing. So yeah, being fully actualized as a human, but going beyond, like, oftentimes when we think of being actualized as a human, we think of, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? But Maslow was kind of a dickhead. So we can understand humanization from a different perspective, one that includes other people. It's not a selfish thing. It's not just me sitting on a cloud being at peace with myself. It's also having a feeling of relationship to other people, being a part of a community, right? The community aspect of humanization is not a small part. It is vital. So, yeah, I think it sounds cool too. I think humanization sounds awesome. Well, I believe that, but Pasta La Pizza, don't you think that he also kind of warped it a little bit? Yeah, okay, as soon as I say that, you type it in the chat. Yeah, so we're all of one accord. Okay, so continuing, the reason why Friere wrote this book is in part to get people closer to humanization. So the oppressed have to liberate themselves. And in doing so, they liberate their oppressors, and in doing so, they become more humanized, and they also humanize their oppressor. So in the beginning, though, we only think about some of these more immediate demands, right? To stop being shot, to stop being put into prison. And so sometimes Friere says the oppressed turn into sub-oppressors because of the oppressor in their head, right? Or they express a kind of fatalism, what y'all might call doomerism, right? There you go, obtuse. But yeah, it's very interesting, right? This concept that oppressed turn into sub-oppressors. I don't know about that one. I struggle with that one. But I will say that the oppressor in your head, The colonization of the mind, as Fanon would say, yes, waxing, exactly. And if you read Wretched of the Earth, Fanon speaks pretty at length about the colonization of the mind, right? That the oppressor literally lives in our heads. The spooky boogeyman of the U.S. government lives in all of our heads in chat right now. None of us are liberated. If you was fully liberated, I don't know that you would be listening to my chat. You might. I mean, one can hope. But I think that all of us, having lived under capitalism, under a constant barrage of propaganda, trying to make us think that the governments that we live under are the most impenetrable, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipowerful beings, right? Killing the oppressor in our heads is a lifelong task. It's not something that we do overnight. So, yeah. But also, it's very funny that he doesn't say it right in the same paragraph. He says it over the course of a couple pages, but this idea that, sometimes you become a sub-oppressor, but other times you become fatalistic. And that's something that I see much more. The girl boss may be the sub-oppressor, right? But most of us are just regular working folks. And so for us who don't become sub-oppressors, oftentimes our dehumanized mind will go to fatalism, will go to doomerism, will go to feeling like it's not possible to have a revolution, and that change in human beings is not inevitable, but also not possible. So yeah, I think he's spot on with that. So pedagogy of the oppressed, as like him talking about the way that you teach oppressed people, the way that you liberate the minds of oppressed people, but also the way that you teach them in general, because he's talking about this as a means of teaching facts, right? Teaching regular ass subjects like social studies and history and shit. Even like biology, I'm sure he thinks it could be applied to that. But he's saying that method of teaching any subject, but from a liberatory standpoint, is not done to people, it's done with the people. So there is a back and forth of education between the teacher and the student, between student and student, and they are empowered in the process, right? So he says propaganda is no good. Propaganda can't reach people. A narrative style of discussion where you are just talking at someone and they are listening cannot reach people. So, he keeps going a bit, and chapter 2 is a little bit more interesting than chapter 1 in some ways. Thank you for the follow, by the way, Wormhole Gospel. Spectral melodies, yeah, they're not all powerful. The internet is full of cop fail videos, for sure. So, he talks about how being an oppressor messes with you, okay? This is one where I don't agree with everything he says, so be forewarned. He says that violence comes from oppressors. I think that I have a bit of an issue with this way that he discusses violence, because he talks about all violence almost as a pat kind of statement where he's just like, violence bad. And I think that he is almost expressing that to do violence is to become an oppressor. But it is a silly way of thinking, I think. It's in some ways a cowardly way of thinking, because the only way to liberation is through violence. It's plain and simple. You cannot have liberation without it. You cannot peacefully protest your way to liberation. And some people will say, oh, you're talking about self-defense. And what I'm saying is, he's talking about violence, period. All right? So I think that pacifism is a petty bourgeois ideology. It is not the way to liberation. But we're going to stick with Friere for a minute here. So once oppressors get into power, or once anybody gets into power, Friere is kind of saying, they keep it via violence and get caught up in a cycle of violence so that the power and the doing of the violence turns them into an oppressor. I don't buy this either. I think that it is a thing that you have to watch out for, but I don't think it is an inevitability. That's a very important distinction. So, when you become an oppressor, then you lose the ability to trust people's capacity to think and to want and to know. This is a sentence that he says, right? So I do think that at some point that was a big problem in previous socialist experiments. I'm talking about the USSR and China in particular. I believe that there was a time when the government lost faith as a whole in the people's ability to think and want and know, and became a bit paternalistic. And so I think some of the things that he says, if he would stop being so absolutist about everything, then I would agree with a lot of it, right? These are things to watch out for. So yeah. Yeah, Choice. That's what I think. Armed joy is the Bible. Right on. Very good. Space Empanada says there's some really rough stuff that went on with the Bolsheviks in the wake of the Civil War mass invasion by imperialist nations. Oh, I know. I'm reading a book right now, Kronstadt 1921. I'm reading about that stuff. Shit was extremely hard. Straight up. That's about as much as we can say. It was very hard. So, anyway. If you lose touch with the people, you become alienated and ineffectual. You become an oppressor, right? And I do think that there is an interesting thing that we can take from that, which is that, when I go out to do mutual aid with some people sometimes, right? When I have gone out in big groups, sometimes people feel very uncomfortable talking to other people, feel uncomfortable being in kind of communion of sorts with the downtrodden, the people who need the aid, and feel a very strong difficulty in putting down boundaries, right? Now, if an unhoused guy makes a comment to you that is, overtly sexual and unwanted, you have every right to treat them like a human being and say, hey, don't say that to me, right? You're not being an oppressor to have a boundary. But many people I have seen struggle with this kind of thing. And so I personally think that if you are unable to, and I know that there's a lot of dynamics going on with this, right? So I don't judge people for struggling with this stuff. It's a matter of liberating your mind. But I think that when we truly see each other as human beings, then we gain these abilities. One of the abilities that we gain is the ability to have real conversations. Another ability that we gain is the ability to have real boundaries. So, continuing. I just feel like there's a little bit of both sidesism going on in chapter 1. And I don't like it, but if you can get through some of that shit, if you can recognize it for what it is and roll your eyes and get through it, then there's a lot of stuff to watch out for. There are things to consider if you are trying to have a revolution. There are things that you would want to add into a curriculum, right? And you want to continue every generation becoming more revolutionary than the past, while still understanding the needs of the people. And there's kind of a stress in between those two, So Chun-Li says, I treat humans like humans. I've personally never struggled with that, and it's got me into a lot of trouble. That's good. I don't care what title someone has. I talk to people the same. That's the way we all ought to be, straight up. All right, so Friere gets into what exactly he means about different styles of education, all right? Is this like the belief that if we feed people, everyone will be a lazy freeloader? If we eliminate police, everyone becomes a criminal? Well, I don't know. I think that one of the things that he is criticizing in that chapter is when people start feeling like they just know what's best for all the people and the people are ignorant. And it's difficult because, like, I've seen situations where the regular people who don't have the vision and don't have the understanding are not quite really ready for full self-actualization. If you look at Kronstadt, there were certain times where, like, the people tried to turn everything into a worker co-op right away, and they're like the output from the factory basically dwindled to zero. They spent a lot of time arguing about who was gonna be management and how they were gonna structure things, and didn't end up actually making much of anything. Similarly, when everyone talked about the peasants getting all the self-actualization at the time, all the small-time farmers, right? Or not self-actualization, I mean self-governance, which is a part of self-actualization in a lot of people's minds, right? What do? They wanted to reinstate free trade. So it's like you're trying to have a revolution, and you have all these people who are trying to like starve out the country and are trying to introduce economic models that absolutely will not work for the country, and people who are in the name of democracy driving their own shit into the ground. And it's like, the fuck are you supposed to do? So the answer is not repress everyone and figure it out later. The answer is that there really isn't a direct, easy, good answer, and that these are all very complicated things that, like, when we look to some of the revolutionaries of the past, it's not like they were just being raging dickheads. They were struggling with the hardest possible questions of the time and today, right? Because these questions that they struggle with, we still struggle with today. So, like, yeah, Lenin fucked up plenty. Stalin fucked up plenty. Mao fucked up plenty, right? But I would just say that, like, watching through the books of history that I read, watching what they are dealing with, it is sometimes I cannot understand how they didn't just lay down and die, because it was so fucking difficult. So when it comes to U.S. education, I feel like it's not so much the banking model of education as the litter box model of education, due to the nature of the deposits being made. Oh, shit. That's funny. All right. Agree with that, Pheasant. Do agree with that. And Jason, I think a lot of us may have oppositional defiant disorder as well. But let's talk about the banking model of education, because this is interesting, all right? Teachers oftentimes have this idea about teaching, like they have facts, they have something to teach, and the students have something to learn, and that the direction of learning is one way, and that maybe a student will come up to you with something interesting sometime, but that generally speaking, you are pouring your knowledge into the student and molding them into a better human being. They teach the world as if it is a static thing, or whenever they teach about things that regular kids can understand, they present it in such a weird, alienating way that the kid still ends up, even though it's something they understand, not really understanding, and still just having to accept what the teacher's saying as what's real. Why is that, right? Why is it when we talk about regular things, we still somehow end up alienated? Well, what Friere postulates here is that it's because of the fundamental model of teaching. The way that it's being done means that any subject matter, no matter how close it is to your heart, will end up being alienating if it's done with this model of teaching. And I think that is fucking interesting, right? Because what it shows is there are things that are important beyond the facts, right? And the way that a teacher treats you, the way that the teacher acts, and the way that you act back to the teacher, the way that you see yourself, is crafted in that moment of education. And it's repeated again and again. It's reinforced again and again. But that it's so much more than just the simple subject matter that you're learning about. This part of the book was very, like, it really made me think a lot. You know what I mean? Because I like book clubs. I like the way that book clubs are run. I like learning together with people and sharing. Sometimes I get annoyed when someone pops off with some dumb stuff, but I've oftentimes thought about alternative methods of learning and how difficult they are to do, to implement, because I've tried to implement some of these things in my classroom. And sometimes the students are very resistant, right? And I think that's because of breaking down this thing that they have been reinforced to think like for many years is a process in and of itself. Chun-Li says, education makes us into little worker packages rather than humans ready to experience the world. That's exactly what Friere is saying here. It's 100% what Friere is saying here, right? So the teachers all see the students as little receptacles, right? Little worker packages, as you say. The teacher deposits, the student accepts, the student memorizes whatever the teacher said. And the better that happens, the better the student is considered and the better the teacher is considered, right? Now, this is what's interesting. It imagines people as malleable and changeable, right? Now, being malleable, being moldable as a child is something that we just take for granted. But isn't it an interesting idea that maybe the moldability of children's minds is something that is capitalized upon and is reinforced? It also destroys creativity and makes people into believers of whatever the bullshit they are taught by those in authority. And I think that's true too. Our education model very much does that. So much so that all you have to do is look like an authority on something for people to take you a whole lot more seriously, right? You can just look at Twitter for that. People looking at somebody who has 100,000 followers and being like, all right, well, this person probably has some interesting things to say. Yes, Daria, exactly. Malleable and changeable to fit the information. So it makes it to where you no longer trust your own understanding of things, your own experiences. You trust what you're told. They're mainly teaching for budgets via specific tests. So that's true too, the memorization thing. But the act of turning education into something for cranking out answers to tests is the most grotesque form of alienation because it separates everything from anything, right? The test is an inherently meaningless thing. Everybody knows that it's an inherently meaningless thing, right? So education happens accidentally by design here. And I think that's exactly what Friere is saying, right? That we have in some ways stumbled upon with this teaching just for tests, the most alienating possible way, the most clear banking model method possible, the most capitalistically mechanized way of education, right? I thought I hated math because of the shitty school system. I tutor calculus at my college now. If it wasn't taught so terribly, a lot more people would probably actually like math. I agree with that. When I taught math, I had many students tell me that. Yeah, I thank you, Chun-Li. I'm glad this is making a lot of sense. I appreciate the things y'all are putting in chat too, because it's making me think too. So the oppressor society is he doesn't say the words the oppressor society. That's just my word, but he talks about the way society operates. I felt this shit as a kid too. I mean, when I was a kid, one time I was kind of a wild kid. So I dropped out of school, and but right before I dropped out, I went into the office where they do the announcements, and I grabbed the microphone and I said, everybody just do what you want to do. None of this shit matters. Just do what you want to do. And what's really funny is the principal and everybody in the office just looked at me and they were like, "Are you done? Okay? Are you done?" Anarcho-Gomerism, yeah. It's really funny too, because at the time, I really thought I thought I was doing something, you know what I mean? Grabbing onto that microphone and making an announcement. And it's I'm sure everybody looked up and then looked back down and was like, all right, and just kept fucking going. Yeah, Steffi, totally. A lot of people around here not actually bad at math. You have that learned helplessness for sure. And Gom. Slime on beans. That's good. I don't know, Comrade Voltron. Maybe, but I doubt it. I feel like it takes more than just shouting on the fucking intercom. So the oppressors want to change the consciousness of the oppressed to accept their situation. They don't want to change the situation. This is something that I was like, yes, this is the straight up truth. This is like the Democratic Party in a nutshell, right? This is, I mean, the Republicans as well, but for different reasons, right? The Republicans say, you are not a bad person. You're trying your best. You're not lazy. You're working really hard, and that's great. There's all these other people out there who are fucking things up for you. And the Democrats say, things are getting better every day. We are all trying to do things. And, if we just come together a little bit more, if we just vote a little bit harder and get the right people in office, then we too will be able to live in a wonderful world. Ain't that great? Lawsuit, go for it. Somebody else already dropped that link. You can feel free to drop it as well. Vote harder, y'all. Another thing that the oppressor society teaches is that deviants must be reintegrated, right? That like people who don't do what society wants, and y'all talking about Armed Joy in the chat, they talk about this as well, treating revolutionaries as crazy people, like as in it is literally considered crazy to want to change society in such a big way. And so they put you in a hospital. Of course, Lawsuit. Let's give a shout out to Lawsuit again. I gave you 1 minute ago. We're going to give another though. Lost Sue. There we go. Yeah, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to go to this GoFundMe right now. Lawsuit, I'm gonna try to do what I can, all right? I'll put some money in this fundraiser when I get done with the lesson. So, okay. Yes, socialists. The whole country could vote Democrat in every election. They would still say, well, we just need to get even more Democrats. Yes, exactly. That is exactly right. That's exactly right. Because it's not about actually doing anything, right? They want us to accept the situation. They don't want to change the situation. That's the nature of the oppressor. So yeah, the Democrats are our oppressor, right? The Republicans are our oppressors. The Democrats are our oppressors. The companies that we work for are our oppressors. The police are our oppressors, right? We have this clique of people over top of us who all oppress us together in several different ways. Is your blender a registered Democrat? So hey y'all, if you could go click on Lawsuit's link and throw a little bit of money, throw $10, $20 towards that, I would really appreciate it. I think that if we can't support each other, how can we support regular people? You know what I mean? We have to think of ourselves as regular people and think of ourselves as people worthy of supporting. So yeah, I really would, Lawsuit has some lung issues recently, so I'd really appreciate if y'all could just click that link and throw a little bit of money his way. I'm going to as well. I can't do any matching right now because I'm not entirely sure of my money situation, but I'm gonna drop a little money over there. And I tell you, as much as GoFundMe can suck sometimes it really can be the way to help some of our comrades make it through the hardest times in their lives. You know what I mean? So thank you, Chinley. I really appreciate that. John. Yeah, exactly, Spectral. See, that's the problem. You've been eating communist toast and it's misaligned your chakras. Yeah, thank you, Pasta Pizza. Thank you. Exactly. The money is for breathing equipment and supporting him while he heals from the forest fires in the area. So, it's not just that Lawsuit is a good person and, it's like a good thing to support good people, but it's also one of them things where it's like, this is a hard time, straight up. It's a hard time for our comrade. And I think it's good for us to do what we can. Thank you. So, here's a very interesting thing. bad people are shown, or quote unquote bad people are shown as living outside of society. But they're not, right? Quote unquote bad people, outlaws, criminals, lumpen proletariat, as I hear people love to say on Twitter all the time, right? They talk as if they are living in a completely different world. It's like when people talk about the black market and you think about like, a bunch of market stalls and it's all like like black tarps overhead or something. No, it's all around us all the time, right? Like people who are quote unquote living outside of society are not. They are always living in society. They are simply used. They are presented as living outside of society so that society can abuse them, right? And I think this is so fascinating, is that he really does hit on this point very well, that like the conception that we have of people like living outside of the norms of society is that they are somewhere else. But really they are, they're living right down the street from us quite a bit. And so yeah, this conception is in and of itself oppressor conception. So we people who live in neighborhoods, who have houses, can develop an oppressor mindset towards people who are unhoused, right? Simply by seeing them as outsiders to society, as people who have given up. We're all a part of the same society. If you got a job, if you don't got a job, we are part of the same society, right? So rejecting this mindset of like the only people who are part of society are people who have jobs is important, We really do be living in a society. Yeah, it's buying that Discman from your shady cousin. Exactly. As I hear people say on Twitter, oh, come on, your boy Marx literally said it himself. Don't be like that. Well, Jason, he did. Marx and even Lenin had a lot of disdain for the lumpen proletariat. I think they was wrong. I think a lot of people think they was wrong. Mao and Huey P. Newton definitely had some uses for the lumpen proletariat, right? I think that very similar to this, the way that Friere can sometimes be absolutist about things, Marx could be absolutist about things, right? And sometimes the lumpen proletariat can be reactionary. There ain't no doubt about it. Lumpen is like the people, there's a lot of definitions, so bear with me, but it's kind of like the people who are not, part of the working class, who have been pushed down so much by society that they are living below subsistence, meaning they have to steal to survive, or they have to live on government assistance to survive, or they have to live on other people's charity to survive. So criminals are oftentimes, like gang members, are considered lumpen proletariat, right? Yeah, lumpen. There you go. I think that's how you spell it. So, yeah, chronically unemployed, stuff like that. Exactly. Prisoners. So here's the thing. I think that Marx was wrong about the lumpen proletariat. Disabled people, that's a great question. Some people would say they are a part of the lumpen proletariat. So am I a lump? So here's a different perspective, all right? Saying that they are useless is obviously bigoted and wrong. So Marx was wrong about that. Saying that they are the most radicalizable is something that many people have said, and I'll tell you, in my experience, it's not true either. It's not. At least to people who talk to me, right? And maybe it's because I'm a cis white man, but I'll tell you, people who are on the street, who are starving, are concerned about getting their needs met and are sometimes having big issues that make it to where they can't really focus on politics for a bit, right? So when you want to talk about who's radicalizable, sometimes having a certain amount of having your needs met so that you can bear to think about some other things comes into play. So, I mean, also the lumpen proletariat have been used in the past by the rich. Like the rich come by and say, hey, we will give you a fuck ton of money. We'll give you more money than you was ever given before if you act as our shock troops, right? Get cleaned up and come round up these bad people that we don't like and kill them. The rich people do that. That's how the SA started in Germany, right? Started off by a bunch of people who were considered the dregs of society, and eventually they all got killed. Like the good, people that the Nazis considered good, ended up killing these original SA members. You know what I mean? But yeah, so the lumpenproletariat absolutely can be used by the reactionaries and sometimes can be difficult to reach. But nonetheless, I think it is completely bigoted and wrong to say that the lumpenproletariat are fundamentally reactionary, because in the case of Huey P. Newton, he was very successful at radicalizing quote-unquote lumpenproletariat members, people who ain't got jobs, who have been treated the worst by society. So it's, I think that there's nuance to that shit. Yeah, Jason Voorhees, that's what I'm saying. The Black Panthers and the Young Lords were more than able to do it. And I will say though, and this is important as well, right, that you also have to look at the longevity, the staying power of the movements, right? That, like, they ended up fizzling. And I'm not saying that's because they use lumpenproletariat. That would be completely incorrect, in fact. But what I am saying is a complete focus on lumpenproletariat and ignoring the working class sometimes means that your movement runs out of fucking money. So you don't have to go begging to petty bourgeoisie, and you don't have to live off of charity, but revolutions running out of money and having people be so depressed and pushed down by the government that they end up giving up is real, right? So finding ways to deal with that and finding different groups to radicalize whenever one group or another is suppressed is important, right? Yeah, the most oppressed have the highest allostatic load. Yeah, agree with that. Yeah, spectral melodies, exactly. It suggests an essential nature which bears a striking resemblance to racist ideology, especially when so many of the people who are forced into the lumpenproletariat in the United States are in fact non-white. So, yeah, and people are definitely becoming lumpenized, but lumpenproletariat discourse can get very nuanced, it can get very difficult, and I'm probably not the person to lead it, so we'll move on a bit. So, again, Friere throws in that using propaganda is treating people like empty vessels. Or like he says something like that. So he keeps talking about how propaganda is bad. I don't buy it, personally. I think that he is very strong about this whole idea of like a clean way of doing revolution. And I think that he is wrong about his way. I think it is idealistic. And he says in the beginning that people will call him idealistic. But I just have to say that, like, sometimes, right, to break through the propaganda, you have to think the way that the person you're talking to thinks and present things to them in the way that they will understand. Once you have done that, once you have crafted your message and the medium specifically for the person, you have engaged in propaganda. Straight up. So, liberatory education is problem-posing education. This is different from the banking model of education. Jason. Yes, Friere in the 70s is like, this ding-dong guy is going to come along and I'm going to piss him off so much. So liberation is a praxis. What does that mean? The way to liberate is through doing. It is an action, right? It is not something that it occurs in the mind. It is not something that occurs in the world without your input. It is an action that you take. This is Space Infinata. Okay, we'll get to that in a bit. That's funny though. It's the action of people upon the world to change it is the vehicle for liberation. All right. So all education, if you are trying to teach people in a way that is not just depositing information into their head, right? If you want to teach people in a way that allows them to teach themselves, then they have to be acting upon the world, or else it's reactionary. That means you have to make the students into student teachers, and the teachers thereby have to be teacher students, right? The teachers have to learn from the students have to be actively teaching the teachers. And the way that this is done is through dialogue, right? So a conversation where there is mutual respect, where there is a question posed, and then the students talk about their own experiences, but also go and find the answers themselves, right, is important. So the students stay in he calls it a cognitive mode, right, not a narrative mode. The professors are creating an environment in which this type of education can happen, this self-education, this active education can happen, right? But they are not simply pouring the information into the minds of the students. So, I mean, I agree, Spectral. Personally, I agree. So I'm going to put my own self into this a little bit. This is similar to task-based instruction. So what is task-based instruction? It's the idea that instead of reading from a book and memorizing rules or memorizing facts and then spitting it back out in a test, you have a problem to solve. You have a thing that must be done, a task, and the students must figure out how to do the task. So what do you provide for the students? You provide books. You make yourself available for questions, right? But the students have to be the ones solving the task in the end. And you do it such that it is not simply a go look for the information, come back and write it down here, where there is a certain amount of synthesis. There's a certain amount of actually understanding and learning and using your brain that is necessary in order for the task to be completed. So I'll give y'all an example of task-based instruction, all right? Setting up in a Spanish classroom, right? You've got a bunch of English-speaking kids, right? You set up in a Spanish classroom a ticket booth. And you say, okay, kids, you're going on vacation. This is the travel agent's office. So you have to speak to me in Spanish, and you have to figure out a way to get back home, right? So they have to do things like they have to figure out the money exchange, and then they have to figure out timetables. They have to figure out how to speak to the person at the ticket office to buy the ticket. They have to use all the proper words in order to make sure that they get home. So it's a simple exercise. It's kind of silly, but there are so many different vocabulary sets that the student will have to use and understand in order to have that simple interaction, right? So Friere doesn't do this very much. I just gave y'all an example. Friere waits till fucking chapters later to give examples of what he's talking about. But this is the kind of thing when I was teaching using task-based instruction, that's the kind of thing that I do, right? Spectral says they've done studies with this. There were occasions the students found much better solutions. Yeah, for sure. And that's what Friere is saying in many ways, is that students are capable of that, and that true learning happens when the students are the ones acting and finding the answers and presenting them and solving problems in class, right? So problem posing education can be verbal. It doesn't have to require a whole lot of artifice. Like what I just talked about as far as like, setting up a little ticket booth and having like things that the students can use to take part in this scenario. It requires a bit of artifice. It requires a bit of like building shit up, imagining shit, right? But Friere taught literacy, and a lot of the literacy that he taught was through, having discussions with the students. And I think that he would loop that back into writing and reading, but getting the students to want to engage with the material in order for them to have these higher level discussions was part of it. So I didn't really get into his concept of the posed problem. I didn't really understand what he was trying to, like, his examples didn't make sense to me, basically. But I will say that if you take it at the name of it, the face value, right, that it is a good model for having people understand things on a very deep level, because it's not just that they are regurgitating facts, it's that they have had their brains on the entire time and they have found a way to do something using the subject matter. About to wash dishes for 5 hours? All right, Jamie, have a good one. I'm glad you came by. So let's see. Someone says this sounds a lot like play. Indeed, it is like play. And the power of play in task-based instruction is talked about by basically everyone who talks about task-based instruction. That using games, but having high stakes, as in like making it to where it really does matter to you if the students are able to accomplish the task, is important, right? You still have to create this environment of education. So it's not that there are no teachers, there are no teacher students, there's still a teacher student, but the student teachers are engaging in a very independent, liberated way. Jason Voorhees asks the exact question that I thought about, the literal exact question that I thought about with this. I, having taught several subjects, right, was like, okay, how the fuck does this work with math? And the answer is, I thought back to this time, like there were certain classes that I would teach that would get a real rise out of students. They would really dig into the topic so that they could understand. And one of them was, I would have them pretend to buy a car, okay? And I would be like, hey, everybody in this classroom, y'all ever bought a car? If you did not know how to do what I am about to teach you, you got screwed. You got screwed because these are predators. These people who run car dealerships, they will give you a lot of bullshit. They will find a way to present things as if you're getting a low payment, but they are giving you a terrible interest rate. And if you don't know how to do percents and decimals, you're screwed. So what happened? Well, they got interested. They were like, all right, well, I don't want to get screwed out of thousands of dollars. And I would walk them through exactly a scenario of getting screwed. I'd be like, all right, let's take a brand new Ford F-150 and let's give you a percentage of like 8%, right? And let's look at how much they say you're going to pay at the beginning and then how much over time with interest you end up paying. And they would be shocked. They'd be like, holy shit, that's the amount of money that this car is costing me? Holy shit. I'd be like, yeah, exactly. So I'm like, so we're going to work together to make sure that you never get screwed again. And we're going to practice these decimals and fractions again and again until when you do this car buying exercise another time, you don't get screwed at it. You come out with exactly the interest rate that you want, the things that make the most sense to you, and you feel good for the rest of your, loan term about how you got treated. So anyway, it required a certain amount of the normal math practice because fundamentally math is a lot like music where the students have to do problems again and again, different variations of problems until they can really wrap their mind around all the different formulations and how, not formula, but formulations and the different ways that it can be presented, as well as how it connects to other parts of math, right? So that's a pain in the ass, but whenever you eventually apply it to these real situations, you use like hands-on methods for showing things, you connect it to the people's real lives, and and you don't just verbally do so, but you actually give them a task to do. You pose them a problem that they must solve. Well, yeah, gets them interested and is liberatory, I think. Yeah, permutations. In calc, we had to do design and build a roller coaster using derivatives and stuff to find the proper intersects. Bonus points if you figure out how to do a loop. That's awesome, Pheasant. It's awesome. Yeah, theory and application, like learning music keys and scales. You just have to do a certain amount of practice, but the practice in and of itself cannot be the end goal. No one wants to listen to music that's just going over scales faster and faster. This is why I practice my scales, but not my multiplication tables. That's funny as hell. All right, so thank y'all for coming by this Friday. I'm not going to go through the entire book today. I'm breaking it up into 2 because it's a lot. I mean, I feel like I've given y'all a lot. You've given me a lot. Friere gave us both a lot. I've just described prog rock. That's funny. There must be a reason I don't listen to prog rock. You gonna add this book to the list, Chun-Li? That's awesome. The book name is Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Yes, Waxing, totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. So yeah, let's see who's online right now. If Lawsuit is online, we'll go into Lawsuit, but he's not. So let's see. We got $27. Pinko, Dr. Squeakers, Dexter, my friend. Oh yeah, hey, thanks, Space Empanada. Oh wait a second, Space Empanada. Are you Zoe? Are you Zoe? Or are you reading that book? Are you in that same book club as me? Anyway, DM me if you're Zoe. Okay, good night, socialists. Let's see. Let's raid into Dr. Squeakers. I don't think we've ever raided into Dr. Squeakers before. All righty. Y'all take care. And thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I think you're cool. Okay, shit. I forgot that. So sometimes I think that you're 2 people. Okay, hold on. By the way, yeah, I'll do it later, Jason Voorhees. But we look out on Twitter for something for for a friend of mine. Squeakers. Okay, let's fucking go it. No problem. So, okay, thank y'all for coming to the stream today. I really appreciate you. And I hope y'all have a good night as well. Thank you for stopping by. Let's fucking go.